Hey guys, it's the Conic. And with day 2 of the league done, I wanted to give you an update of the build because a lot changed since then, especially picking up our second ascendancy. So I'm going to go over the changes I made to the build as well as grievances with wolves so far and everything in between. So like starting off, why is this, what are the grievances with the wolves? Because like that is like the biggest issue people have with them. And a single target, we've kind of solved that with being a hybrid setup so far. Wolves are awkward to scale, and the reason they're awkward to scale is because of the current tag situation. What tag situation am I talking about? You will very quickly see my wolf pack and my pounce have 10 level differences. This is very big when it comes to minion skills because they scale very well with levels. This means pounce gets to get a lot of damage and wolf pack is just left in the dust. Not to mention wolf pack also gains max wolves with levels, so it's really detrimental to not have those levels. Why is there a difference? Because somebody decided that pounce was a melee skill, so it could get plus the level of melee skills, which is really nice. But wolfpack is not a melee skill. Why isn't it a melee skill? I don't know. It just isn't. But then wolfpack is a companion skill, and then pounce is not a companion skill. So wolfpack gets to benefit from an onslaught node that affects only companions I get on my tree, but pounce doesn't get that. And then you have this conflicting ways to scale these two different setups, because one only scales with minion and companion modifiers, while the other only scales with melee levels and minion modifiers, essentially. And it creates this very awkward situation where I would personally love that they changed this and gave wolfpack the melee skill, because it was designed to be used with a talisman, and a talisman highly incentivizing you to use it with pounce if you want to go for the wolf leader fantasy, or pack leader fantasy, as you will. But anyways, I will talk a bit about the discrepancy in this as I go through the gear section, because that's where the primary bulk of like this discrepancy is coming from anyways. So we're going to start off with the passive tree, as it is going to be a lot has changed with our second ascendancy. And if you don't know what that is, our second ascendancy essentially makes it so when we take a keystone, in a medium radius around that keystone, we can pick up nodes without connecting them to our tree. This allows us to pick up notables very easily, and I'll give you a few examples. Currently we're using Wild Surge Incantation. Has nothing to do with our build, but it allows us to pick up increased spirit and presence AoE from here, as well as minion attack and cast speed from here. And eventually, if we have decent amount of like energy shoot coming from our helmet, maybe even illuminated crown. These are options we can take. It's very nice to have. Then you have Black Flame Covenant that gives us Vow Mending, as well as Chaos Res and minion physical damage as extra chaos damage. Now, minion survivability is also a big thing in this setup. Wolves tend to die, especially with pounce, and single target is not easy to resummon them. So you want them to last as long as possible. That is why this is very important. The regen here is very important, and the Chaos Res is really good, as well as the physical damage reduction and Chaos Res coming from here. I don't think this is worth using yet. I plan on using a gem that will allow us to use the wither effectively, but that is not for a while, I think. So I'm probably going to unspec this. It could be in better areas, essentially. Reservation is out of the range of this AoE, so we don't actually get to select it, which is why we still path up here. Then we also pick up Pain Attunement to allow us to get on companions have onslaught while you are shapeshifted, and attack damage per minion in your presence, which gives you self damage, which is how we're also trying to scale our damage. And then Bringer of Order is hybrid minion damage. We're picking up elemental res from here, which for our minions, which is really nice. And then we're picking up minion life. So that's some increased block chance, but this will eventually be null and void. What's important here is the increased minion life, or again, minion survivability. Then we come down here. This is the bread and butter of how we are now scaling our minions damage. As you see, I have a max of 73 rage. This means at the high end, we're getting 73% increased minion damage, as well as increased minion attack speed, which is a lot in PoE 2. Like prior to this, you couldn't get that much minion attack speed coming from your tree to even begin with. And we're not even done with rage, because we can still switch our talisman to a +12 max rage talisman, which would take our rage to 85, which even increases that further. And don't forget, rage also gives us more AD. So again, it also scales our personal damage to go for that hybrid playstyle. And then you also have this anoint we will eventually get that will make it so our minions get rage when we generate rage. We regen 5 rage if you regenerated recently, essentially. And they still have a max of 30, so this is just going to be 30% more AD. But 30% more AD is 30% more AD. It's really strong. And that's like the bread and butter of the setup. Now let me talk a bit about the pathing and when you would think about swapping. I was pathing through this route like I was yesterday, and I came all the way here without picking this up. I was like this up until I was almost done with interlude, so towards the mid-level 60s, and that is just fine. I also pathed from here up here, picked up the minion hybrid nodes, picked up some rage nodes. After picking this is the priority before you touch anything rage. Before this node, you don't really care about rage. You don't want to scale rage. Ignore the rage. But once you pick this up, you want to pick up your rage nodes. So you want to start picking up your max rage while shapeshifted, as well as max rage from here. However, you do not touch this node until you have your eternal rage spirit gem, and that costs 100 spirit. So you really need to scale your spirit in order to be able to fit eternal rage as well as wolf pack. And then past that, once I had enough points, I just removed points from here, shortened the distance here. I saved the point going here. I lost some minion damage, increased minion damage, but we also just picked up some extra nodes here, so it allowed us to get some increased minion damage from the rage, and also allowed us to get some attack speed as well. Now for the nodes we are going to be taking next, my plan is to eventually pick up Lord of the Wilds, and this is going to be a very strong keystone. However, it requires a very specific scepter. What do I mean? It means we can use scepters alongside our build. However, because we're using eternal rage, that 50% less reservation efficiency is going to take our 100 spirit cost eternal rage to 150. This means we need a lot more spirit to compensate, but this also cuts the amount of spirit we have by half. So it's very, very awkward to have, because if we were to get a 170 spirit scepter right now, we would still be at 170 spirit, but we would now have a 50 extra cost eternal rage. So it creates problems. Now there's two ways to combat this. We can drop eternal rage entirely and drop the anger management node entirely. Then we go back to the old way we were regenerating rage, which I'll talk about in the gem section. But it becomes you then have rage decay again, and it's less consistent. And if you go on a longer space between packs, you lose that rage and you have to stack it up again. So you have times when your minion damage is less than 73, and you have times when it is ramping up as you're clearing the pack, but by the time you're filling up on rage, the pack is basically dead, and then rinse repeat. It's a bit more awkward essentially, but you can do that. You drop eternal rage, or you drop eternal rage, you drop anger management, and then you pick this up. You then get levels of minion skills that scales your minion levels to give them some extra damage and survivability. And then because you now have a scepter, you now have allies in your presence have added AD. You also have potentially you have a bit more spirit if you decide to go spirit. You have support minions you can use pain offering. You have things you could do to fill this gap. So I would say it's more of a quality of life swap rather than a mandatory swap if you were to choose to do that. You have worse rage, but then you gain levels and you gain some extra minions that you can then use this on. So worth noting. However, there is another downside to losing rage, and that is in the form of your ultimate. When you cast your ultimate, all your rage is consumed, and for the amount of rage that was consumed, you get duration on this, and this gives you a lot of damage gained as cold, which is almost like damage as it's basically damage as extra, but takes all your damage and gives you cold damage in return for you and your minions. Now this is very nice to have, and by having perma max rage, we are able to have very good uptime. We have 21 seconds up, and then almost 8 seconds down, and then eventually we might go for a different support gem that lets me take this all the way down to 5 seconds. And I think we're also going to be picking up this cooldown wheel, which will also help our cooldown a bit more to take that down to like 4 point something seconds. So uptime is going to be very, very good on this. up to you what you decide to do. I think I'm going the route of stalling the scepter upgrade until I can get a really good scepter to justify it, and then trying to scale with max spirits on my sockets, as well as going for minion reservation, as well as going for some more spirits here and then maybe grand spectrum or whatever else. But in any case, I think that scepter upgrade is going to be a late game thing. Is the TLDR of that. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel out a lot. This leads us into our item section. Now, earlier I mentioned the fact that I made a change that shifted power from my minions to myself, and this is because if you were to the base types that GGG made, there are only 2 minion base types. There's one that requires level 16 and there's one that requires level 77. Why there's a huge gap and there's nothing in between as a filler, I don't know. GGG, why would you treat minions this way? I don't know, but it is a situation. So that means the level 16 is capped kind of at +4 to all melee skills. So if you want more of that and you want more base damage, you're going to have to switch from a minion damage to something else, which means by doing that swap, your wolf pack loses minion damage, which just is a nerf, but doesn't gain levels to compensate. But your pounce gains levels to compensate because we get 2 extra levels coming from this. So pounce isn't quite as hit, but wolf pack is. Again, tag problems annoy me, but it is what it is. So by doing that and getting a talisman that had a lot of physical damage, base physical damage, we were able to get a lot of power for ourselves, which was how we started doing giga damage on ourselves, and I will stop doing as much damage because Wolfpack ate shit for it. That being said, there are multiple ways we plan on moving more damage to our minions, and this one of those things was rage. Rage returned a lot of that power back to our minions. Aside rage, scepters are going to give them a lot of power. I dropped a +2 to level of all melee skills army. That was really good with attributes and everything. I would like to drop this for an actual level of minion skill army with spirits. I just don't think that's happening anytime too soon. It's going to be very costly, so I'm using this for now. Again, Wolfpack is doing shit because I have this instead of minions. I also have a +2 level of all minion skill helmet, and I went for a pure armor base because I eventually spec'd into this node, which gives us +1 ES per 8 item armor on equipped helmet. So we're incentivized to go as much armor as we can on the helmet, which then gives us a bit of extra flat ES to compensate. It's giving us ES alongside our armor. It's very nice to have. We're mostly going to be scaling armor, I think. I could change, but I'm leaning towards armor right now in this setup. Chest piece is still just spirits. Amulet is spirit base with +2 and a lot of attributes to help with my attribute requirements. These are life and res. I actually replaced my rings finally towards the end of campaign, so that was nice. This is still the +2 level of melee skills I've been using all through the campaign. I should replace it, and I will, but I haven't yet. And then these two are basically movement speed, as much res as possible, life, res. It's basically same thing with the gear we've had. And these two are still irrelevant. We still don't spend time in human form, so it doesn't matter. Next up, skill gem section. Now, we have gotten to greater jeweler orbs. So as you can see, Pounce and Wolfpack are currently 4-linked. My priority for the next 4-link, I think, is going to probably be Arctic Howl, because there's so much this skill is going to use in terms of supports that are good, that I think that's just the priority right now. But anyways, so looking at everything we have here, we have Pounce. It has rapid attacks, steel code attunement, feeding frenzy, and then heavy swing. Heavy swing has one very glaring problem, and I think I might replace it. But the very glaring problem it has is it only scales the melee phase damage, and any damage is extra code that we get from our ultimate or other sources just doesn't get scaled by this. And then it gets less attack speed, which also nerfs the cold damage, obviously, because you're attacking less. So I'm probably going to replace heavy swing eventually, but as of right now, seeing as we were in the process of getting our ultimate forms uptime higher, and we're still doing more physical damage and cold damage, it makes more sense to just use heavy swing. But I will talk about the one change I'm going to make once I'm done with this. So we have Pounds and Wolfpack. Again, exact links across both of them. Literally the exact same. Nothing changes. They're the same minion essentially. Then we have Cross Slash. I just added Rapid Attacks 1 because I had it. It still doesn't matter. It's just here for summoning our minions on single target. Arctic Howl. This skill is so giga. What is it providing us? This is providing us flat code whenever this Warcry hits a frozen enemy to us and our allies. So our minions get flat code damage. And it is providing us where you're going to be using Rage now that we have Eternal Rage to bypass the cooldown. So we always have it up. And we also echo it. So it procs 3 times whenever it actually procs. And this is important. Brittle Armor also helps us shred physical damage whenever it freezes enemies. And why do we want it to proc 3 times? Well, aside the fact that it makes it so the AoE is so big that it cannot miss our minions. And when we're clearing, it's basically just going to be freezing enemies hit by our altered minions, basically, because they do cold damage. Now, we also have this Warcry Wheel, which gives us 3 critical weakness on enemies per hit. Now, 3 critical weakness is 1.5% flat crit to all attacks on the enemy. So this means when it procs, we get 3 Warcries, which is 4.5 every single time. So if we do this twice, which we can skip the cooldown thanks to Rage. Why is this not working? I don't know why it's not working, but in any case, it allows us to apply critical weakness very easily. As that was awkward. As well as the boss we mentioned. And we are going to be adding Bataire's Vengeance, which is a lineage support gem, I believe. It doesn't have the lineage tag. I don't fully understand why it doesn't. If that means we can get multiple, that is huge. But anyways, what does Bataire's do? It makes it so whenever you freeze a target with the supported skill, for each rage you have, your allies gain 1% damage as extra cold. You and your allies. This means we're going to be getting 73% damage as extra cold on our minions, which is, again, boosting their cold damage. So now, that's paired with our ultimate, means we now have more damage gained as cold than we do fizz, and we can actually skill, and it's consistent, by the way. It's very, very reliable, except on single targets. But if they are going to be doing cold damage from ulti, those freezes are going to be coming out way more. So, and if we're going to be scaling the cold damage from our skills, then again, we are going to be very reliable with this. And if we're reliable with this, that means we just get 73% damage gained as extra. And we're going to be putting this on our if we put it on, we have 2 options, and this is why I wanted the 4 link on the Arctic Howl. Is in the ideal universe, it goes in the 4th link and we don't have to worry about anything. But realistically, right now it will go in Lunar Assault, so it can help us while we're clearing. I think is where my mind is at right now. But that is currently the game plan. Now for Lunar Assault, you're going to be using Ice Bite. This is an Ice Bite support, so you know it can't be put with Ice Bite. We're using Rage to generate Rage, and we're using Brittle Armor for the same thing. Shred Armor while we're clearing. Now, for the last setup we had with our Arctic Howl, the setup without Eternal Rage for when you do not have that spirit, what do? There are a few support gems you want to use. For one, you're going to want to use, let me just find the support gem and I can tell you. You're going to want to use Echoing Cry all the same, because having it proc 3 times is really good. You're going to use Raging Cry, so it's generating rage for you on each of these casts. So long as you're surrounded by enemies, you're going to get rage. It really helps with rage gen. And for the last one, you just have Brittle Armor for the last support gem. That is its TLDR, but with that setup, you do have a cooldown. You can't just spend rage to bypass the cooldown, which is another quality of life that comes with having Eternal Rage, basically. Past that, we have Pain Offering we don't use because we don't have the spirit to have a spare minion, so like we don't use this. We have Eternal Rage, like I said, and it's paired with Upwelling because we have 16 spirit extra. So we have Upwelling on here, and then we have Lunar Blessing. Lunar Blessing is our ultimate, and it's huge. It gives us a lot of damage gained as extra cold while it is up. And we just want it up as much as possible so our minions gain cold damage and we gain cold damage, and it's just very nice. And the moonbeams hit like a truck. This thing is cracked. 305% attack damage is insane. Like, it's so strong. I cannot recommend this enough. This is so good. This is such a good spell. You have two options with it. If you just want Giga Clear and everything, then you can put damage supports in here and call it a day. I have cooldown recovery and prolonged duration so that we have even better uptime. The prolonged duration for more duration. This is for cooldown because your cooldown doesn't take while the skill is up. This means that you have to wait for the entire duration to finish before, you know, cooldown starts ticking, which means you want as much CDR as possible. And then we have levels because it's just one extra damage, as extra code. It's very insignificant. Odds that we're better off with like Cold Pen or a damaging support here. I actually considered putting Battery's Vengeance in there, but it didn't let me. But that about covers the gem section. Overall, setup is really good. Enjoying myself. It's for a hybrid playstyle. It's been way more fun for me than I expected. So I will likely keep this going hybrid style, but we'll see how the build shapes up. I plan on still shifting more damage to my minions as I scale up, getting Scepter, all the upgrades I mentioned throughout the video. That is my current thought process heading into day 3. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing as it helps the channel out a lot. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And with all that said, thank you for watching.